the tape for this, our main event of the evening. We introduce the champion, Chris, the West Side Strangler Brennan. Let's get it on!
Hey guys, we are here with Rich Chou. I'll quickly give the things that I know, and then you can kind of fill in the gaps real quick of what you've done. I know that you worked with Super Brawl, Elite XC, Strikeforce, Bellator. You're now doing Wimp to Warrior, which is Alta, and that's going really well. What any other organizations that I missed?
Well,
Elite XC?
Before Elite XC was actually Rumble on the Rock.
Oh, Rumble on the
Rock. But I
Rock.
actually did fight in Super Brawl, and I know TJ very well, and we ended up working together later. But I actually got started on the promotional side with Rumble on the Rock,
and that was with BJ and JD.
Yeah, JD was really running the show. BJ was fighting,
Okay.
headlining the cards and really helping us grow. But JD was the brains behind the business side, and he's one of my closest friends. Consider my brother, and he really gave me my big break. So yeah.
Did I forget any other organizations in there?
There's been. I think those are the main ones. Yeah, I went from Rumble on the Rock, Elite XC, Strikeforce, Bellator. A couple things in between where I helped out other organizations, but yeah, for the most part, I'd say those are the big ones.
Sweet. Born on Guam.
Born on Guam, where we met.
Right. Now, so I was curious. I remember being on a flight with you, either from Hawaii to Guam or Guam back to Hawaii, and I also remember you in Guam or on Guam. So I don't remember which came first, but probably the fights on Guam.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, man, that was 20 years ago or so, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn. It's crazy.
You were a kid.
Yeah, I was. I was just. This was before I even started with JD, and I was just getting settled. So if I remember correctly, I was training at Grappling Unlimited. I had moved to Hawaii.
Okay.
I was training with Egan and Barrett and the whole crew over there at GU, and we were bringing guys over to fight on Guam. So that was a good time, a really fun time where I was able to work with the two promotions on Guam. I mean, it was crazy back then too. For such a small island, having two great shows going on, it was good for the camps that were able to make all those trips. And so I would bring guys over and help find them talent from Hawaii. And I remember, being on the same trip as you, the same flight, and then our guys fighting on that same card.
Yeah, I don't know how it worked out, but we fought on one weekend for John Calvo, and those guys stayed, and the following weekend I had two other guys fight for Roman on that other organization. So I was actually, we came a few days early and stayed a day late. I think I was there for probably 12 days straight, and we had stayed at a really nice hotel on the beach, and Carmen Electra was there doing a movie with the guy who plays, he's in Point Break, real jacked guy that was fighting him at the beach. He was also in Cyborg. But there was so much went on over that whole entire time we were there. And that's, I forget who fought on the first card, my brother and Josh Smith maybe. And then the following time was Adam and Buck and, or the other way around, I forget. But it was great time over there. It was, a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's crazy how the two promotions were able to, Guam's really small.
Yeah.
And to have two promotions, thriving at the same time. Usually there's only room for one.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, so it was PXC and Fury. And over in Hawaii later on, we had Rumble on the Rock and Super Brawl, which became icons. So to be able to witness on the islands,
right,
these two promotions competing with each other, it was fun. The fans benefited, and I think a lot of fighters did as well. But that's very rare. You don't see that. Usually in a small town, there's just one.
Right.
One promotion sticks around and establishes itself and kind of weeds out the others. But to have two simultaneously doing great shows is rare, and it was a really fun time.
And it's real small, right? Most of military base and then residents and not a whole lot, the beach and
150,000 people or so
total. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not.
You can drive from. You guys probably did it at one point. Drive from one end of the island to the other in hour and a half or an hour or so.
I don't know if you were there. I think I had two trips there besides the one long one. I think there was one other one, but they asked me to ref Dan Severn and King Kong.
Kong, yeah, from GU. I brought
So,
Kong.
so they fought, but that same night was a guy who was kind of a thug, thug guy, gangbanger guy versus a guy that was a cop. And I ref this match, and the cop knocks out the other guy. The other guy's from Ensign's gym. The cop knocks this guy out, and I'd never refed in my life. And why they asked me, I don't know, but I ref him in that fight and Dan Severn's fight. Well, I stopped the fight. The guy got knocked out. Everyone starts complaining and yelling at me.
Yeah.
So they no lie, they had to take me out from like under the ropes, put me in the back. They transferred us to our hotel. We ended up having to move because I was on the phone trying to get a hold of Ensign. Ensign wasn't there, but literally all these guys were after me, and I'm like, bro, they just literally asked me tonight if I would ref, and we are like hiding out on Guam. I'm like, this place is, number one's way too small. We are way outnumbered, and I know Ensign pretty well. We had fought in Pride before, and I was like, I just need to reach him, and it took a number of hours before I finally got in touch with him. And as cool as me and him were, that was his guy. So he's like, hey, let me see the footage. And they had to get him footage of what happened before he's like, yeah, he was out. That was a good stoppage. And then they called off the dogs. And I was like, what if it wasn't? Were you going to just tell him, come get me?
Yeah,
it was crazy.
I remember that night. It's Steve Roberto versus Manny Chong. Manny is the police officer. Yep. Steve, very good friend of mine. We were training together. I was actually in his corner. I just flew back
that night.
Yeah, I was there.
Oh,
it was. I remember. I'll send you a photo later.
So you can be honest.
It was me.
Was it a bad? Was that?
No, it was fair. He got dropped, and then you came in.
Landed a couple, and it was, and I.
Yeah, and those are the rough ones when the guy gets up right away, and you're like, oh shit. Because I've actually reffed about close to 100 fights in Hawaii.
Okay.
Under the Rumble banner. Basically, I would work with JD to match the big cards. And then on the smaller local shows, I would ref.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the worst is when you stop a fight and the guy, and he was in a bad position and you see him taking damage and you think you did the right thing, and you probably did. And then they pop right back up and start complaining. You're like, God damn.
Yeah, and I didn't know the guy, like I say, is a thug. That's what they billed it as.
Sure.
It was like the cop versus the bad guy.
Yeah. Steve Roberto, we call him Bert. Yeah, he had gotten into some trouble.
Yeah.
Around that time. So yeah, it was the big, that was the big fight on Guam.
Yeah.
And Guam is crazy, man. I've taken a lot of guys there, and
I mean Hawaii as well. I've seen so much happen on the island when I was there.
Yes.
And if people don't know Ensign and Egan, those are two guys that you should fear, right?
Yeah.
They know everybody. Ensign runs deep, right?
Yeah.
And so I was just like, oh, this is like the worst case scenario ever. Why couldn't I have stopped the cop and had the cops mad at me? It was terrible.
Both islands are crazy. I think, natives are restless kind of
of course.
scenario. But I think Guam, as you said, being smaller, it's hotter, whatever the reason, man. The local boys they're down. They're pretty crazy. So that's that scenario you've been in where you're at the hotel, like worried guys are going to come and snatch you. No, it's happened. And in several other situations like that where a fight gets stopped and, the hometown fans are not happy and they want blood and they want Chris Brennan's head.
Yeah. I was like, so I'm never reffing again. I don't care who it is. I'm not
Being
interested.
a ref is the worst,
I'm not
man.
interested.
Being a ref is the worst. It's like you could have reffed 10 fights that night. 9 of them would have been just really great, good calls. And then one is controversial and you suck, right? And everyone's trying to kill you. But
so thinking back, I would think that Dan Severn would have been a main event, but was he not? Were they the main event? Because I feel like when that fight was over, that was it for me.
That was that was why people were there.
Okay.
Dan's a legend, obviously, right? Much respect to him, and a pioneer, but people were there that night to see Bert and Manny go at it. And I remember that night, I think Dan stopped Kong maybe the second round or so. And I remember going back to the hotel with Kong, and then he was trained so hard for that. He was so devastated. He thought this was like his big opportunity, and it still was. Anytime you can step in the ring or the cage with somebody like that, I think it's a win-win, right? All you can do is learn and grow from it. But yeah, I remember that night very well. Now that you're bringing it up, all these memories and details are all coming together. I will send you that pic later. Somebody sent it to me not that long ago, maybe a few years ago, and they said, hey, remember this? And it's Bert in the corner getting ready to go, and Ensign Melker and I are there.
Melker, he was a stud.
Yeah.
Little guy, right? Yeah, he's a stud. Yeah, I got a newfound respect for heavyweights that night, the power, because Dan Severn, not known as a power puncher, was on top of him in half guard or guard and just landing body shots and standing in the ring while he was landing those body shots, which was like boom, boom. And I was like, holy smokes, and he's not even you're not known as a heavy hitter at all.
Yeah, more of a grinder, right? But
something. What does a big heavy hitter sound like or feel like? It's crazy.
Yeah, he hurt Kong that night. Yeah. We went back, he was all busted up, and Dan's the man.
All right, so that's where me and you started.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
I didn't even
on an island in the South
Pacific. You were in the corner that night, so that makes it even crazier because now I'm like, God, maybe it was wrong.
No, it was, man, it was a big deal that night. We all went back to the hotel, right? Everyone wanted to watch it again and talk about it. And obviously Steve, Bert wasn't satisfied,
right?
Which is understandable.
Sure.
But I believe, they had a rematch later. And
did it go the other way?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, then proving me wrong even more. All right. So from there, and you, do you know how old you were? You were young, right?
Yeah, I was
early
young.
20s.
Yeah, early 20s. Just training jiu-jitsu, just learning everything. Just happy to tag along with all my big bros in the game and learning and just taking it all in.
It's funny you say that because I felt like you already knew everyone, like you were already in with everyone. And I talked to somebody recently about you and kind of told them the avenue you're going now. And they're like, does he really know everyone? I said, bro, he knows everyone. Like from day one, if there's anybody that I would ever want to ask about somebody in this sport, you're the guy I'd want to ask because
thank you.
Kind of goes, hand in hand with you from day one till now. Has just been unreal, the connections that you've had.
That's been my, thanks for acknowledging that. And I feel like being 43 now and being in the industry for as long as I have been, and just really feeling blessed to have all the experiences I've had. I look back, and to me, I'm most proud of, and I think the reason for my success is longevity is just not the smartest. I wasn't necessarily the best at any one thing. I've never claimed to be the best matchmaker, manager, whatever. It's just being able to adapt and in different environments and just be cool. I was just sat back, kept my mouth shut and learned from all these guys, from Ensign, Big John, Melker, Egan, so on and so forth. And then when I met the Penn family and all the guys that I interacted with and met through them, I just love to be around the sport, love to learn, and just be around OGs like yourself. And just shut my mouth and took it all in.
You've definitely done it right because literally in all the time I've never heard not even a bad thing about you, but never even a negative, it's like everything has always been good. And that's hard to do not only in a sport, but in a sport that spans from, continent to continent and state to state. And you've been involved in so many different, organizations and situations and still be, on the up and up all the time. It's commendable.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's the thing I'm most proud of. Had some great moments, some not so great moments, and everything in between. And I think the key, like nowadays, I got some kids that want to get into the industry and will ask me for advice. And, that's what I'll talk about is just learn, take it all in, do the right thing. Several times there were opportunities like for example, Elite XC going under, just kind of going down with the ship, so to speak.
Right.
At that time there were a lot of people throwing others under the bus, self-preservation mode, distancing themselves, just trying to position themselves so where they weren't attached to it and could go on and do other things. And I just, I just kept my mouth shut and just took it all and just kind of remained true to myself, and I didn't pick, just really stayed calm and just weathered the storm. And it's happened a few times. And I think that's where I've been able to, even in bad situations, maintain people's, respect.
Right.
Having to make tough decisions, whether it's cutting a guy or giving them bad news, just always being upfront about it whenever possible and just being straight up and honest. And walking away, might not be happy or satisfied with the outcome, but at least they can say, hey, that guy was straight up and treated me with respect and did it like a man, because that's what everyone deserves in this game. I've respect everybody from the world champ, to the guy who's just getting going. If you're going in there with respect and heart, I'm going to give you that back,
right.
And I think that's what's helped guide me through. Again, I'm just a huge fan of the sport that respected everyone, especially the OGs, and just took it all in, and that served me well.
Awesome. So first matchmaking job, or kind of started matchmaking, was during the Rumble on the Rock with JD, is that right?
Previously, those Guam days, those early days, it kind of gave me a feel for it. Like the guys on Guam would say, hey, whether it's Eli and Joey or Roman, they'd hit me up and say, hey, this is what we're looking for. With Hawaii being closer than California, obviously, it was easier and cheaper to bring some of those guys in. And, the whole island vibe was cool. Going from Guam to Hawaii, the Guam fans would always like the Hawaii fighters. And so that's how it kind of started. Hey, this is who we're looking for. What do you think? And I'd be at the gym and we'd talk to the guys. And then after a while, I'd branch out and talk to other gyms as well, not just the guys from GU, but try and find, like, if we couldn't find anybody at the home gym, I'd go out and use some of those relationships. And so that's kind of what gave me a little taste and a feel for the game, so to speak. And then when I got into, when I met JD and he offered me a shot, with the organization, and basically jump in and learn with him. And he said, I'd like you to focus on matchmaking. And then he'd show me the ropes and, give me some pointers and tips. But that's where I took it to the next level and actually was, I guess, more official.
Right.
And then started dealing with, bigger camps and bigger name fighters.
That organization was pretty awesome. And that's where, correct me if I'm wrong, BJ fought Henzo.
Yeah, BJ fought Henzo.
Sharuto used to fight on that card as well?
Sharuto used to fight on that card. That was kind of Sharuto's breakthrough that got him into the UFC. I believe it was beating Gil Castillo the way he did. That was on the same card that BJ fought Gomi. Okay. So BJ fighting Gomi at the time, remember the UFC didn't have a lightweight division right at that time, or it was just, it was, kind of, they hit the reset button on it. So at that time, that was like, those were the best lightweights in the world.
Yeah.
Fighting in Hawaii in the Rumble, that was a big deal.
When I fought in the UFC against Miletich for the belt, it was for the 170 belt, but it was lightweight.
Right.
That was, at that point in time, that was the lightweight belt. And then later they added 55, 170 became welterweights, and then 55 became the lightweights.
That's
and that was when that started with BJ and Jens, and it kind of went from there. Ironically, the night BJ fought Jens the first time, I fought Gil Castillo on that card and lost a terrible, boring decision. I couldn't stop his wrestling, and all I heard all night was Henzo, watch out for the triangle, watch out for the armbar, watch out for the triangle, watch out for the armbar. And he just constantly, would and that was it for 15 minutes. But it's so crazy how everything comes around with all of the fighters, different weight classes and everything, but we all still met somehow. Yeah,
those old days, there's something to be said, and maybe this is just part of the process of getting older. The older I get, the better it was, or the more special it was. Like I've developed, I'm so nostalgic these days. Like you and I, just every time we connect, we'll always manage to somehow end up going back and talking about that era. So that's I think that's important, because there's so many fans. It's not well documented what happened back in the day. Mm-hmm. It's terrible footage. It's almost like what we're doing now. It's almost like this oral history being passed on, this storytelling, right? Because we don't, there's some photos, maybe some really bad quality footage, but man, the fans now don't know what it was like back then, how crazy it was and how cool it was. Yeah, it was definitely different. It was so cool. I don't know if you remember Joe Gold, that owned Full Contact Fighter, but he started following me recently after I did a different podcast. And then I started following him, and some of the pictures that he posts that he took way, way back when, I was like, oh man, like just
crazy back then. It was just so different, and the fans were hardcore fans, hardcore fans back then, and
everything was hardcore.
yeah.
I mean, that's when I
rules
get
were
asked,
hardcore.
everything was hardcore. There was no commissions. Even back then in Hawaii, there was no athletic commission. You rent the Blaisdell, rent a place to host weigh-ins, and you show up and fight. We didn't have to clear anything with anybody, and that changed years later. But yeah, those early days, man, it was the wild, wild west, and people will ask me, what's the difference, and there's several, but it was just a special time. It was more like gladiator days. There was no money. People weren't doing it. People weren't doing it for the money. There was no fame. You did it because you really loved to do it, and that's why I say that. These days it's a sport and it's great. I think we're both happy to see it grow,
Sure.
and we're benefiting from its growth. And it's great. People are able to make money now, get famous, get sponsors, get the respect that they deserve. But back then, it was just you did it because you loved it, and it wasn't about money. You didn't care who you fought. There wasn't this long process of analyzing an opponent. I mean, guys were taking fights they definitely shouldn't have taken, but that just speaks to the just kind of the attitude and the spirit of the time. It was just people just wanted to fight.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to fights when I was in California where we would show up and they would start looking at guys like, you two fight, and they'd move over. You two fight. What do you weigh? Yeah, you got no scale. What do you weigh? Yeah, you guys, you'll be next. So
just the eye test, right? You guys look about the same
size. You'd be like one, fight two, fight three, and guys would they'd fight. Yeah. Like you'd never get no. They would fight, and it was nuts back then. But that's how raw it was. That's how real the sport was when it started. It was a fight.
Yeah, it was special, and obviously now it's big biz.
Yeah.
And fighters have brands now, and a fight has to make sense, in several different ways. And I get it. Again, it's all good. It's a real sport. It's legitimate. But there's moments where I just laugh, or I would get frustrated because I think back to the old days, like, this didn't happen back in the day. Guys just wanted to fight and took it, and we didn't have these long conversations about the path that it would take them in their career. But again, that's very necessary, and I'm glad. I mean, you and I talk about all the time to connect it with the roots and where you came from to where Luke's at now.
Right.
Yeah, it's you're handling his career properly, taking your time, being patient. There is a path, and your experience and your background just makes it like what you're doing.
I thought about it the other day with him. He's at fight 7 now as a pro. My fight 4, 5, and 7 was Pat Miletich, who was number 1 in the world at the time. So basically, that's like him 3 fights ago fighting Pitbull 3 times.
Yeah,
like that's how it was back then. It was just that's what that's who I want. And they asked me to fight, and I said yes. It was a good fight. So 2 months later, we did it again. It was a good fight. So 2 months later, we fought in the UFC. But it was just crazy the difference between now and then, and the skill levels, right? The skill levels now are insane, and the lengths that people are going to train and strength train and everything that's involved in a fight camp now. Like my camps were 2 weeks long in Big Bear just to get acclimated to altitude, and then we would fight, but I didn't have a long drawn out get prepared.
Right.
I'd rather bump shoulders with you and turn around and fight than 3 months from now I'll meet you after school in 3 months.
That's the hard part. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
The preparation, what it does to you mentally and physically. But you're right. What you said earlier, the level now, it's the highest it's ever been. It's freaking amazing. And I think a large part of that, and this is connecting to you and Luke again, and I've seen it with the McKees, and like there were kids that have grown up on the mat,
right,
that have grown up training. It wasn't like back in the day where guys couldn't make the U.S. team anymore for wrestling, so they transitioned to fighting in like their 30s, right? Like Dan and Randy and other guys, or you training later on as an adult, right? Really getting good quick and then going to fight. Now they're so damn good because they started training.
Yeah.
I
was 21 when I first started training at all.
Right. And how old was Luke when he started?
11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably training grappling, right?
Yeah,
Jiu-jitsu
for a couple of years,
wrestling.
and then started wrestling in high school and so on. But he went in for the first couple months was hit and miss, and then it was just that was it, nonstop. That's all they did.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's what I've seen with talent, and then you'll have a parent, someone like yourself and Antonio, these guys that I grew up watching and respecting, and they come forward with their kid, and you're like, oh man.
I see people at the fights now. They're like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "My son's fighting." Like, what? Zabit, just this last fight, he was looking at me and he goes, "Coach," he goes, "Your son, or not your son?" He didn't know yet. He goes, "Your fighter look like your son." And I said, "It is my son."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh." And then he
no
kind of
shit.
told
Did you
all the
see
other
the
guys.
ears?
Yeah,
Come on, man.
like,
Wasn't that the dead giveaway?
But yeah, it's been it's definitely a different approach when it's your son fighting than your fighter fighting.
Yeah.
And even then you care so much about your fighters, you get more nervous for them fighting than yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that seems to be the case. You'd rather be the one fighting because you can control things.
Yeah.
But when you're in the corner, right, everybody just says you're screaming, you're just doing everything you can to try. Like you wish you could go in there and start making these adjustments, but you're just pulling your hair out in the corner.
He's been so calm, and it's kind of like touching base on what you're talking about as far as people getting ready or being older, being young. He had, before his first fight, over 300 jiu-jitsu and wrestling matches. Tyler, when he decides to fight when he gets out of college, he'll have 300 or 400 plus whatever he's done in college. So there is a little bit more of comfortable, that comfortability walking into the cage because of the stuff that you have done. Still, obviously, the nerves of the fight, but it definitely helps if you've done something like that a million times as opposed to never done it and here we go.
Yeah, he's a gamer, right?
Yeah.
And they have all these great opportunities now. Like, you can compete in something every damn weekend, I feel like, right?
Yeah,
Grappling, you want to go do a smoker. It's out there, and I think all these things have contributed to the growth of the sport and made the level what it is today. It's, I know we talked about how maybe the fighting spirit isn't the same,
Right.
but man, the level, these guys are so damn good everywhere. Every organization has just studs and killers. It's pretty cool to see.
Like thinking back, who fights now that could endure what Ensign did fighting? Was it Mark Kerr, I think? Or
Igor, that put him in the hospital.
Yeah, like,
and that was a
fight was, and everyone else nowadays, that fight stopped,
Oh, yeah.
early on.
It's there's not too many guys. Yeah, it's funny. Ensign just he was on another podcast, and he posted, or a quote or a clip got posted up recently that he said the same thing, like exactly what we're talking about back in the day.
Yeah.
It was different, and why he fought, and he touched on that, and he just brought up everything he went through. I mean, he was always, that's why I became a fan first, and I'm really glad I got to know him and learn from him. But he was the guy that every time I go in there, I'm prepared to not walk out.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, right? Like,
and he means it. He's not the guy talking, I'd rather die in there than
he
lose.
proved it several times, and
numerous times.
Yeah, he fought guys he shouldn't have been fighting when you think about it, like from a modern weight class perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, you did the same. Everyone did that back then. But remember, he was in Pride fighting Kerr, Vovchanshin, Big Nog, so on and so forth.
I just saw him, Ensign, last year. I went to Hawaii to teach a seminar at Babo's, and Ensign, I guess, lives in Japan now, but he's got a jewelry deal on the island, and he happened to be there when I was there, so we went and saw him. It was very cool to see him. It had been maybe 15, 16 years since I had seen him, and big boy. He's a big boy. But, yeah, man, he's an icon. He's a guy that there will probably never be another Ensign as far as...
No. One of one.
And not only that, even if there was, they would never be able to prove it because the refs would never let a fight go like they did then.
There's no open weight fights anymore.
Yeah.
And,
so
it would
that's
get
awesome
stopped
for him to, have that and basically know that he was as gritty and tough and his fighting spirit as it gets.
His fight with Frank, I believe that was in Shuto, or no, Vale Tudo, Japan. His fight with Frank is like still one of my all-time favorites. I mean, They went
Shamrock?
at it. Yeah. They
yeah.
went at it, and that was a beautiful fight. He's a guy that it wasn't always necessarily about the win, right? It was about, and I think he addressed that in this clip that I referred to earlier. It was like, look at my record, but every time you knew,
Right.
you know, if you were a fan, you saw, you know, heart, effort, you know, try to put on a show and go for it. And he came up short in that fight with Frank, but I think even Frank says to this day that's the hardest fight of his career.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And just that's what people love to see. That's
why
what
the
fans
Japanese
appreciate.
fans loved them so much. Pride and Shooto both over there. They did not care if you won or lost the fight. They wanted you to fight.
Yeah.
From the bell, they wanted to see you fight, and they'd tell you straight up, like, you're going to get invited back whether you win or lose if you go out there and fight with your spirit. And they end up with a lot of guys like that, but not a lot of guys to the extent of Ensign. But it was amazing back then, especially fighting over there.
I mean, shit, they used to give red cards and take money away from you. Like, you can't do that here.
They would take a yellow card, would take 10% right off the bat. One more yellow card, the next one's red, and that's a wrap.
They would take money away from you for being boring and during a fight and being boring.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't lay and pray over there. There was no way. And I think that's why, you know, those grinding wrestler types never did well. First of all, I was in a ring, right? So it's a little different.
For sure.
As you can attest
Takedown
to.
is much more difficult. It's based off of skill, for sure, to get a takedown in the middle of the ring or in the corner as opposed to against the fence, for sure.
And the refs there, remember, there's no commission. There still isn't.
Yeah.
And so the promotion really can dictate these things. And it's like, all right, we're taking money away from you, and we're standing you up quickly every damn time. And so you were forced to adapt to those rules, and you had to throw down and be more exciting. Or, hey, if you get the takedown, I need, you know.
Busy.
Yeah. And so,
but the crowd was educated. Like, you pass the guard and the crowd goes
they're
crazy.
clapping.
Yeah, they're
like super quiet while you're working, right?
Yeah.
Working, okay, working a half, get the pass, and then they're just like clapping, and it was like they were appreciating it at the highest levels. And here you're still getting the stand him up, kick his ass, and booing. Yeah.
It's terrible.
But hey, it's as we've been saying, like, where we are today, we're all happy that the sport is where it's at. And if we still got to deal with that,
you need those guys, I guess, because they're the ones buying tickets.
That's how I always felt. Whenever fans would complain, I would have guys, you know, oh, that card sucked, buddy. You know, guys would come talk shit to me online. I'm like, hey, you bought a ticket, you showed up, or you watched, you gave us your time. You're entitled to. Right. I don't mind. I'm happy you paid attention and you watched, and we'll make it up to you next time.
Yeah, so there were fights. Luke's last card, I think it was the Sabatello and Higo fight. The crowd was booing the whole time. And it was boring.
Yeah.
But they were booing the entire time. Guys were yelling crazy stuff. And Luke's like, man, these guys are terrible. Not the fighters, the crowd. He goes, it's terrible. I said, this exact building, I fought Gil Castillo. We were on the ground the entire time. They booed the entire time. The very next fight was Chuck Liddell and Suloff. They stood the whole time, and the crowd booed the entire time because it wasn't exciting enough. They want you to stand
Tough
in the
crowd.
pocket and just
they want
bang
blood.
it out. Yeah, for
they
sure.
want blood.
So I was like, it's just, you can't make everyone happy.
Yeah, they want blood and concussions. But, you know, to this day still, you know, I can distinguish between the two. Yes, there's an entertainment factor, and there's I got to do what I got to do, and I'm still watching it closely and appreciating, trying to look at the technique of all these little nuances that I'm sure you can speak to.
Sure.
The hand fighting, you know, fighting for position, underhooks and whatnot, and all these little things that I can appreciate as a fan and a practitioner of the sport. But then I put my promoter hat on, and I'm like, you know, this is like we have to talk about this later.
So a good example of this that just happened recently is MVP and Storley.
Yeah.
And I know Scott wasn't happy with that as well.
Yeah, he was vocal about it.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you're Storley, what do you do? Like, you really can't. He stood with them one round, you know.
I think the fourth, it was all on the feet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then and then in the fifth, MVP talked trash to him about taking him down. He's like, I just stood with you for a full round. You didn't do anything. But really, he either goes out there and puts on a highlight reel and gets knocked out, you know, or he goes out there and wins the fight. What's more important? And fighting here, probably winning the fight is more important. You know, we're not in Japan where as long as you go out there and fight like a warrior. And I feel like what could he have done differently and still won the fight? I think that was his only option.
Yeah, like this is a very interesting conversation and topic right now, and I think it's the most important discussion in MMA right now, judging.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that's a fascinating fight for those two reasons. It's judging and how the fans perceive who won, and also the judging criteria, which I know they're working to improve it, but there's still a lot of ambiguity, right? It's not unified. Right. And that's a whole nother can of worms where across the board, across the country, not everyone is united on this is how you score a fight and judge a fight. And then also, what's a guy supposed to do with his career? Was Logan just supposed to go out there, throw down, get knocked out by MVP in one round just to satisfy you, when now he's an interim champ, he gets paid more, you know, his opportunities go up. Like that's why that kid competes.
Right.
You know, he's here to win and compete, and he got the job done. And I know he was frustrated after, and you put yourself in his shoes and you can understand why. Like, man, I did what I was supposed to do. This guy's supposed to stop me and he couldn't. What was I supposed to do? And then you got the fans who, it's very interesting, and you see it like after every show, it always comes up, the judging. What's the criteria? You know, if you're trying to knock me out, but I keep taking you down and holding you down and you can't stop that, and you want that knockout as a fan, and that's what you want to see, and you're not getting that because the other guy's just too good of a grappler and a wrestler, you're favoring the other guy who's getting taken down because his style fits your preference of what you want to watch. But that's not how this works.
Right. But unfortunately, it kind of is how it works, because judging, I was going to ask you what you feel about judging, because judging is basically opinion-based. Right?
Totally.
It's three guys' opinions,
and
your whole career rides in their hands. And they don't know what goes on, you know, in order to get to that fight, let alone if you lose that fight, where you go. And we were just talking on when I was talking to Matt Schnell the other day, there are guys, the two guys with the most wins in UFC history, Donald Cerrone and Jim Miller, have never had the belt.
Right.
Jim Miller, I don't know if he's even fought for the belt.
I don't think he
has. But he
has
the most wins in UFC history. That tells such a story of what goes on below the championship level, where it is such a grind, you know, and a loss can do so much to you. And if it's a judge's decision loss that was bad, you know, it cuts your pay in half and it sets you back 2-3 fights. And so do you think there is, and you don't have to go deep into it, but do you think there a point-based system that could happen, you know, like where you get points for doing this, you don't get points for doing that, or whatever, or is it always going to have to be based off of what these three guys think?
That's a great question, and I think that's on the table right now. I mean, I would talk to Big John about this all the time, like after the fights, and there was some controversy. You know, he's one of the pioneers and one of the leaders in the industry, you know, with regulation. I know he's taken a step back since he's joined the broadcast side of things, but, you know, he helped create the unified rules and whatnot, and he's, you know, his judging seminars and refereeing seminars were really the standard, right? I would talk to him, and he has his opinion in his way, but then, like you said, these other guys think completely differently. Right. You know, I do think it should be on the table, which you just mentioned, points. And it's like, look, if we both have our game plans, you and I step into the cage, I want to knock you out, you want to control me and try and submit me, or just, you know, we know where you want to take the fight.
Right.
If you execute your game plan, regardless of how entertaining it is, did you win? Right. I mean, that.
I feel like a referee standing up a fighter on the ground, boring or not, and I get that it might be boring, is what if I'm on the feet with you and I can't take you down? Can I ask the ref to put you on the ground for me? Right, that's the exact same thing.
That's a great point.
I can't take you down because your skills at stopping my takedown are better than mine. But if I take you down, my skills are better than your get-up skills, so I can hold you down. If I can hold you down, you can't get up. It is basically cheating to stand you up. Here's a chance, buddy. Let me give you a chance and stand you up.
And that's done for entertainment, really.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's for the crowd to make everybody happy, for the promotion, you know, for everything like that. But But at the same time, just because one of the styles is boring to certain people if they're not busy, and I think they should be busy. Like my son's a grappler, but he's busy on the ground. He's constantly looking for the finish or punching and looking for the finish. But it really is the same thing. If I can't take you down, they're not going to help me put you on the ground, but they will help you get up if you can't get up. So it's like, if I've gotten you down and you can't get up, I've got to be winning at that point. Whether they stand us up or not, up to that point, I've pushed my will on you, and yours isn't. Your skill set's not helping you.
Yeah, that's I think we share a very similar view on that. Yeah, this is what I wanted to do. I couldn't do it, and the other guy did what he wanted to do. If there's damage, it's a different story. If the guy standing, like if I'm hurting you bad and then you're getting takedowns, I think it's a different story. But I don't think there was a lot of damage done in that particular fight. Let's keep going back to that example.
Are we looking
MVP
at
Storley, I don't think MVP dropped him.
No.
Or really hurt him, like rocked him, or so it's, it'd be a different story if he was hurting him bad on the feet, landing some big shots. Then I can understand where, because we've seen guys win fights off their back because they did so much damage, before a takedown or around a takedown.
Sure.
like they get stood up and then he'd go to work again and hurt him, leg kicks, land a couple combos. He'd get taken down. No damage was done on the ground. They would reward, the other fighter.
Right.
So we've seen in this modern era, a guy can win a fight off his back, or even going for sub attempts.
Right, being busy.
Yeah,
being
getting
busy.
a bunch of catches, even though you didn't finish. You had
legit attempts.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. But yeah, overall, if you're trying to knock me out, you can't. I take you down and control you for 3, for 5. Again, it's not popular. It's not the most entertaining. But yeah, I understand it.
Yeah, it's tough to prepare for, who's judging, what are they looking for tonight, that type of thing. Like fighters kind of have to know what. Everyone goes out there with their game plan, but if you are in a fight, like a title fight for 5 rounds, you kind of got to know what they're looking for those 5 rounds. If you think you may not put the guy away in those 5 rounds, and so it would sure be nice if it was something that was more cut and dried. This is, you get this for this, you get this for this. This doesn't score you much. This does, even if it wasn't an actual number score, if we could just, get a good idea of what really mattered to the judges.
Yeah. There's a app out there, MMA Verdict. I don't know if you've heard of those guys. You should check them out. They do a pretty interesting thing where they get a lot of fans involved. It's a real fun app where guys are coming in, giving their opinions, their thoughts on the scoring. And I know we complained a little earlier about ignorant fans, but there are a lot of really savvy fans.
Oh, sure. Yeah, now there are for sure.
Yeah, I think with the level going up.
There's a lot of people that train now.
Yes, that's right. And so they do know what they're watching. They do appreciate these things. And so if you go on Verdict, it's pretty interesting. And I know they're trying to help solve this problem that we have. But every time after a controversial decision, you go on Twitter, you go online, it's like, this thing's a mess. It needs to be overhauled. And yeah, things need to change for the reasons that you mentioned. And I speak from experience because I've done these deals where I'm like, man, this winning this fight could change a guy's life.
Yeah.
And to put it in the hands of 3 people.
We've seen 30-27s one win, 30-27s another.
Yeah.
Like these guys watched 2 totally different fights just now.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, was he only watching one guy, and was this guy only watching the other guy, or were they watching the actual fight?
Right.
It's so, those are confusing when that happens. I'm like, okay, like that had to be on purpose.
Yeah. and this whole mantra of, well, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. It's like, come on, you know how hard it is to finish?
Yeah.
That guys at this level.
That leave it in the hands of judges is the same thing where people go, you have to beat the champion. You have to beat the champion.
That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. You have to win the rounds, and if you win enough rounds, you win the fight.
Yeah, that's not how this thing is scored.
Yeah, I don't have to beat him more than he beats me. If I just beat him every round, I win. Or 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 5. And so like, no, you have to beat the champion. I was like, that is beating the champion. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
that's a funny one. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people don't know how. There's a lot of misconceptions. That's one of them. You got to beat the champ. No, you don't. It's scored round by round.
Right.
You're not looking at the fight in its entirety. The other thing is people think the organizations, at least here in America, like we said earlier, in Japan, there's no commission, so the organizations can kind of dictate those things. But here in America, the athletic commissions dictate everything.
Right.
They control the judges. The judges work for them, not for the promotion.
Right.
So when fans aren't happy, you'll see, Bellator, or the UFC, or whatever organization it is, they fix that.
Oh yeah.
They paid the judges
I've
off.
seen that a
It's
million
like
times.
that's not how it
Scott
works,
wanted
guys.
that guy to win. I was like,
Yeah.
Scott had no choice in that guy winning.
No,
Trust me.
That's not how it works. So, yeah, I think it's time for our sport to continue to grow, and I think that needs to be addressed, and hopefully it will be. I know people are starting to pay attention to it now.
Yeah.
They
have to.
and hopefully we
sure.
get there.
Okay, so back to Elite XC. So you were done with Rumble on the Rock.
Yeah. So the transition from Rumble to Elite XC was really a great opportunity for us. We had been doing really cool shows in Hawaii. JD called me one day because he was always taking me. The sport was growing around this time, with. And what I mean by that, it was growing as far as on the business side.
Mm-hmm.
You had networks and people on the entertainment side finally starting to see that, hey, this blood sport, like they were a little nervous, right?
Sure.
Now they were finally realize, hey, this thing's kind of coming together. It's damn exciting. It's probably the most exciting sport in the world.
Sure.
Got some real characters and personalities, and maybe it's time to really embrace it. Like they've had time to observe it. And it wasn't like guys were dying after
Right.
every event, and
Right.
it's safe now, and they can finally take it on and start bringing it to the masses, right? So JD called me one day, he goes, we did it. Like we have our opportunity to go to the mainland and work with a big network now to put the fights on.
What network bought a handful of organizations like? I don't know if Elite XC bought or got bought, but King of the Cage, Elite XC, there was a handful that got bought all at the same time.
So really Pro Elite was the parent company.
Okay.
And Pro Elite, what was interesting there, Pro Elite was like this, was meant to be like at the time, MySpace.
Okay.
There's probably people watching this don't even
Like,
know what
what's that?
MySpace is, but at the time, remember MySpace was like
yeah.
huge. And so these investors saw how crazy this fan base was. This MMA fan base. They were at a UFC event, I believe, and they saw these crazy fans, and they're like, wow, can you imagine if we created this online community for them? And that was really like the motivation behind Pro Elite. They weren't like fight guys. That's why they brought us in. We were the fight guys.
Got it.
But they saw this amazing opportunity to capitalize off this, the crazy fans that MMA had. And so Pro Elite launches, and Elite XC is like the main promotion, the main brand. And then they started absorbing all these other ones. Rumble on the Rock. We were the first guys brought in to help kind of put things together, consult, and kind of really build the foundation for the organization. But Icon, which was formerly known as Super Brawl, got brought on. Cage Rage. They were doing great shows
In Europe?
in London.
Yeah.
Spirit
there
MC.
once.
Spirit MC was an event in Korea that was doing really well, and King of the Cage.
Right.
Yeah.
They end up getting it back somehow, right?
Yeah, they
Okay.
ended up getting it back. I think after, Terry did a good job of carving out a great deal where he was protected, and so he was able to get it back. King of the Cage lives on even today.
Yeah.
But some of those other organizations just never really, they just got tied up in that whole thing and never really came back. Guys said to come back and rebrand and relaunch, but that was the idea, was to create a global fighting network that would kind of feed into Elite XC.
Okay.
And we put it into practice. There was a couple great success stories there, a couple moments where that idea really came together. And there were other times where you saw the holes in it and you saw why it was going to be really difficult. But that was our big jump to go from, we were doing big shows in Hawaii, working with all the top guys still, but now we're on TV. We were on Showtime.
Right.
We helped launch MMA on Showtime on premium cable, and then we eventually helped launch MMA on network cable with the CBS fights with Kimbo and Gina.
I was going to say that's where Kimbo and Gina were started in Elite XC, or that's where they first started being on TV?
Yeah, that's where Kimbo, I believe his first fight was against Ray Mercer.
Oh, okay.
His first, we've seen him fight
right.
in the backyards, but then his first sanctioned fight, I believe, was against Ray Mercer, like in Jersey.
Okay.
And then we brought him on board. Gina had fought, I think her first MMA fight was with Scott in Strikeforce, and then we brought her on to.
So Strikeforce was already there at that time.
Yeah, Strikeforce had just made the transition. Scott had just transitioned from being kickboxing for like 20 years or so.
Okay.
Started getting into MMA as he was the first promoter to throw a sanctioned fight in California.
Okay.
And that night it was I think to this day might be the largest crowd ever. Like, it just set all these records, I think, that still stand today. But there was a line around the corner. I remember we had friends calling us from San Jose, like, holy shit, it's fucking crazy. Like the line to get in, and we're waiting. And
that was
and
a
so,
Strikeforce?
Yeah. So that Scott was doing his thing over there. We ended up working with Scott later, and I'll get into that when I talk about the transition into Strikeforce. But yeah, we're at Elite XC doing our thing. We got the big opportunity, launched on Showtime, launched on CBS. Kimbo, Gina, they were the big draws, and very controversial because you had a lot of fighters saying, well, they're not that great.
Right.
But what they didn't realize was they were kind of the hook for the mass audience.
Right. Gina was good, man. She was tough.
Gina was a legit martial artist. Kimbo's fighting spirit.
Right.
He may not have been the most technical guy, but he fought and gave everything he had, and he did. And you left, seeing something crazy. Yeah. Win or lose, Kimbo was just must watch.
If you fought him, even if you won, you left with a headache.
Yeah, he was must watch TV, and so there was a lot of controversy around Elite XC, building so heavily around them. But that was the hook. That was what got casual fans to pay attention, and then you saw all the other guys that were perhaps a little more well-rounded, and we had a great roster at Elite XC, and that's if there's one thing that I'm bummed at, it's that people oftentimes focus too much on the spectacle and not necessarily, like, everyone wants to talk about the Petrozelli fight, but no one talks about all the great fighters that we did have underneath all that we were building up,
And those fights that they talked about, or the people they talked about, those are the ones that got them watching in the first place to be able to talk about it.
I know. I know. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, a very interesting time, controversial time. I personally learned a hell of a lot.
Did Fedor fought in Elite XC?
No. Fedor fought in Strikeforce.
Okay. When did he fight Arlovsky?
That was actually Affliction.
I was going to ask you, did that have anything to do with any of those, or was it just separate on its own?
We actually did it wasn't a co-promotion, but there was cooperation.
Okay.
With Affliction
Fighters.
While we were at Elite XC. And it was actually around that the fight where the Kimbo Petrozelli fight. Uh-huh. Remember, Kimbo was originally supposed to fight Ken Shamrock.
Right.
On that card, we worked with Affliction to book Roy versus Andre.
Okay.
Arlovsky. Mm-hmm. And we also did, a deal where Affliction was all over, the canvas and all those assets and on the broadcast. But so it wasn't a co-pro, so to speak, but it was there was some level of cooperation where we booked that fight.
Okay. So from Elite XC, as that kind of went its own way, you ended up meeting Scott? I
actually had met Scott when I was at Rumble on the Rock. So Scott,
all the way back then.
Yeah, it's just this crazy, kind of like you and I, these moments where you meet somebody and you don't think, years later, you get connected and you start doing some work together. So I had met Scott when we were doing the shows in Hawaii. He was doing K1 Vegas. He was the K1 guy doing shows at the Battle at the Bellagio and whatnot. And he was doing Strikeforce in San Jose.
Saw Chemo and Bob Sapp fight there.
Yeah, man, they had some crazy ones over there, right? And so I meet him in Hawaii. He's there because we partner with K1.
Okay.
Rumble on the Rock did. We did
Right, I remember that.
co-pros with K1. And so he came as a guest, and we met, and just had this feeling like, yeah, I'll see you around, you know. So years later, I see him at Elite XC, and what's funny is Elite XC and Strikeforce actually did co-pros around Frank versus Phil Baroni, which was a really big fight.
Okay.
Was a co-promotion, and I believe we did Kung versus Frank, which is another amazing fight.
That fight was crazy.
So we did these co-promotions around Frank, and what's funny is the backstory behind that is there was a lawsuit there.
Oh.
So this lawsuit, the settlement was Elite XC and Strikeforce needed to co-promote and work together. That was the resolution.
Okay.
So here I am seeing Scott again years later, like, hey, Scott. He's like, man, Rich, what the hell's going on? You know, you guys did this, you guys did that. And then, but we were always cool throughout this chaos. He always knew it wasn't me. There was always this respect. And so Elite XC ends, right? Kind of a disaster, you know, down in flames.
Right.
And as I said earlier, I learned at that moment, I see a lot of people doing different things to position themselves, throwing people under the bus, you know, doing a self-preservation mode, right? It can get ugly. And I just thought to myself, that just doesn't feel right to me. I'm just going to sit here, take it all, weather the storm. I'm not going to talk shit about anyone. I'm not going to say anything about what happened. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. I'm going to sit here, just deal with it. I'm bummed, but I'm just going to just handle it. Just take it like a man, so to speak. And so I'm doing that, trying to figure out what's next. I end up doing a bunch of stuff with BJ. BJ had some really big fights. This was when he was in his prime on that big run at lightweight.
Right.
So I just got involved with his camps and JD, you know, we just got back to doing all that together, which was great. And then I get a call from Scott out of the blue, like, hey, I didn't want to hire anybody from Elite XC because that was just a dumpster fire, and it just was just, you know, I'd rather just have it just be clean. But man, these people at Showtime really like you, and the fighters that are here that made the transition, they keep saying, hey, can you bring him back? Or if there's a guy that you could bring from Elite XC, he'd be great to help with you with this transition. And he goes, I like you, but I was a little nervous about this whole thing. But you know what? Let's have this conversation. What would it take? What would it look like for us to work together? And then we and this is a great expression from him. Let's date before we get married. Come out and work a couple shows before, you know, I offer you a deal and you move out here. Because I was still living in Hawaii at the time. So went out, worked a couple shows, got a chance to meet the staff. Everything worked out, and then he offered me the job. Like after 2 events as like a consultant, made the big move up to San Jose. So that's kind of how I transitioned from Elite XC to Strikeforce.
Strikeforce is my favorite.
It was fun.
Strikeforce and WC, if you think back, those 2 events at the time were like college football, you know, to NFL.
That's a
like
good one.
These guys were fighting for their lives. They wanted to be here, but in my opinion, like that was the pinnacle at the time. The UFC is UFC, you know, it's whatever. But those events put on some of the greatest fights of all time. Between those 2, you know, Uriah Faber and those guys were fighting in the WC. All of the killers. Like if you look back at the fights that took place in Strikeforce and who fought there, it's like, you know, it was amazing at the time. The who's who of everybody fought in that organization. And I knew you, which was cool. Like, just jump forward real quick. Scott, you know, Showtime, everything was the same on Strikeforce as it became when Lucas joined Bellator. So I was like, oh, this is a win-win. Like, this is awesome, you know. But yeah, back then, like, Strikeforce was kind of the first organization that wasn't the UFC that was right here.
Yeah.
You know, it was a big organization, great fighters, great fights. On TV all the time. I still watch Strikeforce on TV all the time. Like, it comes on all the
That's
time.
fun.
It's like, never won't watch those fights.
Yeah, you know, I think what Scott was able to do was bring guys in that the UFC couldn't get. I think that was another thing, because he just was always willing to get creative. And look, obviously the UFC is an amazing organization. They do things their way. It's worked for them. You know, I'm not questioning their practices by any means. They're you know, we're not here without them. Right.
Sure.
I think that's safe to say. But I think what Scott was able to do was be more flexible and do deals a certain way to bring Fedor over, to bring Shinya Aoki over, to bring Musashi over, and get creative and do things a certain way.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a lot of fun, where we were always in a position to work with those guys, and he was always able to bring guys over that you know weren't able to come to America for various reasons. And it was a hell of a run, you know, and even just, you know, outside of those guys, just the guys we had here or there on the roster, you know, there were some events that, they were just, it was just a lot of fun. It was just different. It felt like we were a part of something that was growing quickly, and we were on a roll, man. It was like this 18-month just run. We were hot for like 18 months, and then the UFC came in and stopped all that.
I was so bummed when that happened. Like, that was as bad as Pride for me. And I never got to fight for WC or Strikeforce, and I fought for a lot of organizations, but I never got to fight for either of them. And when that happened, I was just like, because they're not going to keep it. They're not going to keep it and continue to let it build and be another awesome organization. They're going to crush it. They're going to take the fighters that they want, and that's the end of it. And that's such a bummer when that happens. I know it happens with businesses and stuff all the time, but there's not a ton of other good organizations. So when it happened, it's obviously a no-brainer, I guess, for the person who owns it, who's gonna sell it and make the money off of it. But at the same time, it's like, man, I feel like it could have grown to where whoever it was at the time could have made that money down the line. I don't know, but maybe it's just selfish because I enjoyed watching the fights, and I just like the vibe. I like the vibe. It's the Bellator vibe. That's why we're fighting for Bellator. I love the vibe compared to, I fought for the UFC. I've been to the UFC multiple times with my guys. I just prefer it's just a way better vibe, and I love it.
Different culture. I think you nailed it right there.
Yeah.
We try to establish it, make it fun. It was the fun organization.
Yeah.
It wasn't at that time there were no rankings. It wasn't like fights were made because Scott, his background going back to him being a K1 guy and the mindset and kind of the way he did business was very that Japanese style. And the reasons why we left Pride and K1,
right.
That was in him, and that's how he tried to run Strikeforce, and that's how he kind of guided me and said, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I'd like you to work on, and these are the type of guys, and let's do it this way. And it was very distinctly his style, right? And I think it was fun. It really allowed us to do things a little differently, and we were a great alternative. I was devastated when it ended, because here I am, I got here because Elite XC folded, and here I am again. Oh my God,
right.
What is going on? I'm dealing with this again. And a few years later, and even now today, I can look back on it. It was very bittersweet because the opportunity ended, but the UFC buying Strikeforce and then subsequently the success a lot of those guys had in the UFC really validated the work we did there. Our whole team, the whole company, everything we did when those guys became world champions, from T Wood to Rockhold to DC, amongst other guys going over there, and girls doing great, helping launch women's MMA in the UFC, because Ronda went over and helped usher that in, along with Misha and these other Strikeforce fighters. Like, that really in a sense validated a lot of the work we did. It was at the expense of our careers there,
everything, your livelihood.
But I can look back on it now. Fortunately, I was able to land on my feet after another traumatic experience in this crazy sport and business. But we look back on it now, and that's all relevant even to this day because of the conversations. Again, what's the other conversation on the forefront of the sport? That guy can't be the best because he's not in the UFC. That's not true.
100%.
Strikeforce proved that time and time again. However, a lot of people don't want to remember that or don't want to accept that. But yes, guys, the best fighters in the world can be in any organization.
100%.
I don't necessarily look at where they fight. I kind of look at who they train with. To me, is more relevant for that. But I digress. Sorry. But Strikeforce proved that the best fighters in the world can be somewhere else.
I mean, you can't think that it's a big population of fighters now. You can't think that every single one of the very best guys are there already. You know,
Right.
there's guys fighting. You know, there's guys that are going to surprise, you know, the people who are the champs now. And I agree. It's I get in this argument often
Yeah.
about the UFC. The UFC is the name. It's the you know, it's the first. You know, so it's the one that everyone talks about. They're the ones that got big first, so everyone always wants to know, you know. But at the same time, man, it's cutthroat, the UFC. Like, you're there, they don't even know who you are. You lose 2 fights, you're gone.
Yep.
You know, and it's just it's a random or a vicious cycle. And going back again to like the Jim Miller's got the most fights in UFC history.
Yeah,
Never
it's
fought for the
wild.
belt, you know, and Cerrone's never won the belt. And so I always, you know, go back to like Josh Thompson and Gilbert Melendez fights in Strikeforce.
Yeah.
You know, they were like the Michael Chandler, Eddie Alvarez fights in Bellator.
Yep.
Like, the fights are just insane, and just, I mean, to watch those guys put on those shows, those happened all the time. Like, Strikeforce fights were amazing all the time. So yeah, when it got bought, you know, everyone knew that it wasn't going to continue to be Strikeforce. I mean, I guess you guys probably knew more than anybody else, but no one had the full insight on everything yet. So it was like, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Nothing. We're just going to take the fighters, you know.
Yeah, we knew where it was headed. I mean,
Who was the owner? Was Scott in the same position there as he was as in Bellator?
so Scott owned Strikeforce, and he was partners with the guys at the arena
Okay.
that owned the arena and you know, the San Jose Sharks. I kind of
Okay.
manage. You
Got
know,
it.
yeah, that was their whole thing, and so those were his partners.
Okay.
And then, you know, the whole transition into Bellator from there, you know, happened like a few years later. Because,
Yeah. How much time was between the end of Strikeforce and the beginning of Bellator?
Well, there was Scott's non-compete, right? So they
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, he had to sit on the sidelines for a little bit, so to speak. And when that came up, I remember he gave me a call. So I was in between. I was working at Ruka.
Okay.
I went back Pat Tenore, a very, very close friend of mine.
In California?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I moved to OC, and I was in Costa Mesa working at Ruka, focusing still around MMA, still heavily involved in the gym, and really just helping him develop the sport program over there. And that was an amazing experience. I was still, even though I was out of the fight, the promotional game, I was still around in the gym in the back there with Jason Perillo all the time. Bisbing, you know, several guys, you know, BJ was still coming. Just that place is so amazing. Tito coming in all the time. So still around the game, still around really great world-class fighters and athletes. And so I was still sharp, so to speak, when Scott called.
Right.
A couple years later and was
I
like,
said,
"Hey, man, you're not going to believe this," but because I always thought he would do his own thing. That's kind of what he led me to believe, because we stayed in touch, and he's like, "Hey, maybe I'll just do my own thing when I can." And so he calls me one day. He goes, "Man, you're not going to believe this, and tell me what you think, but Bellator, man, what do you think?" And you know, Bjorn was there still, and I'm like, "Wow, didn't see this coming," but.
Right.
Look, I think if we give it our best go, and you know, we get the band back together, man, we can wherever. New thing would obviously take longer, it'd be a little more challenging with all the growing pains and startup life. But you know, looking at their roster, he's like, you know, just check out Bellator a little more. Tell me what you think. And I go, look, there's some good guys over there. And
How long had Bellator been a thing?
for years, because Bellator was around when we were at Strikeforce.
They were, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, Bellator had been around doing their thing. They were all about the tournaments, right? The toughest tournament in sports.
Right.
And,
Right.
and they were, but I believe they started like on MTV too. And, you know, so I was paying attention to what was going on there. And then, I get the call, and he goes, "Yeah, do you feel like getting back in the game?" And so my fiance at the time was pregnant up in the Bay Area. It was like everything lined up. I felt like I had to move back up there to be with her. So Scott was like, "Hey, come back up." I spoke to Pat. He was fully supportive of this move. You know, he's like, "Yeah, go for it, man. You know, we'll always work on stuff together, and we'll always be close." So I left Ruka, got back in the fight game with Scott, moved back up to the Bay Area, and you know, and then did that for 6 years, and we got Luke in, but that was the transition. That was how that all happened.
Him and Bjorn weren't there at the same time,
No,
right? They swapped right then.
No, it was the ownership, the management group did what they had to do, and to clear the way for Scott and the new team to come in, and that was my crazy path in this business continued, right? Like,
right.
Get over here, get your dream opportunity, crash and burn, get your dream opportunity again, and it doesn't work out, and then here we go again.
Right.
And fortunately this time I was able to, although I'm not there anymore, I'm still very close with everybody. At least I was able to transition on my own terms this time.
Right.
So
I think that happens because, like, if you think of other sports, who knows what it was like when it started, but even though this is only a 30 years maybe old sport in the United States, all of these other organizations are basically other teams, right? Mm-hmm. So right now, if something happened to you on the whatever Dallas Cowboys, you go to Phoenix and play for the Cardinals or whatever the football team is. It's like that here. The sport, it's not like that. Like one organization, there's one Dallas Cowboys, and then everybody else was trying to create teams, and it takes a while before others can be, legit and stay and be sustainable. And so it's like you were involved in some great companies, but it's just so, even though it seemed like a long time, it's so early still in the sport. Mm-hmm. It's not a very old sport. And so it unstable, I guess,
volatility.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart.
For sure.
Great example there. You said earlier about, if you're playing football, if you're a quarterback, whatever, you're a football player. There are 32 teams.
Right.
You got options.
Sure.
And the tricky part about the MMA business, especially in the role I was in, matchmaker, talent, relations, however you want to describe it, there's like 5 of those jobs in the world,
right?
With like real legit major organizations where you can make, good money and work with world-class fighters and do it at a high level. And so there's just not that many people that can do this. And a lot of people want to do it, but there's only a handful of jobs. So yes, that's what makes this thing, this entire industry, just the volatility. So when people ask me, I get these kids that want to, hey man, I want to be in the fight game, and I just go, well, buckle up, buddy, because this ain't for the faint of heart, man. You got to be able to withstand a lot of pressure and the ups and downs and the just how, just crazy, this business is.
You say there's only so many, and it's so true. If you even think about the UFC, Joe Silva was the only guy for years and years and years. And just now in the last, 5 years maybe, they've got 2 guys. They've got Mick and Sean Shelby. And there was, I forget who it was before Mick got over there, but it was, it's very, that's for how many hundreds of fighters they have. There's one job there, and that's it. In Bellator, one job, and that takes away, there can only be 5 matchmakers in the world. That's it. That's all you get.
Really. That's that, and
that's wild.
That's something that I always appreciated and kept me humble and just kept me working hard and kept me going. Was, man, how many people want to do this? And would probably do it for free or a quarter of the money or half the money. Right? There's a line out the door for guys that want to get involved in the game and do it all. So I was always aware of that, and I think that just is what kept me, working hard. Like, man, this is a rare opportunity. Don't blow it.
Right. So aside from knowing everybody, right, and just knowing tons of people, what is your, like, how many fights have you watched? Like, how do you, as far as matchmaking goes, what do you do to matchmake? Are you watching tons of videos of fighters? Like, how are you finding out? How do you approach your job as a matchmaker in any of these organizations? It's obviously difficult. There's thousands and thousands of fighters. So how difficult is that?
It is tricky. I'll say that there's 2 sides to it, right? There's the business side, getting a deal done, dealing with a fighter, that's to me, I've always said the easier part is matching a fighter, dealing with the fighter behind the scenes and all the business and all the, the talent relations, as we call it. That was the real job,
Right.
making sure a guy did what he was supposed to do to get there to fight night, saying, this guy fight that guy. Sometimes these fights just make themselves, right? Let's face it, right? Especially at the
Once they're in the organization, for sure,
Yeah.
I can see it's a little bit easier at that point.
Yeah.
But to get them,
the hardest part is, I think, it's fun to recruit new talent. The hardest part for us, because of the way we operated, we do have developmental deals like what we brought Luke in on. That's the hardest part, is taking a guy or girl, taking a fighter from the beginning, starting their pro career, and making sure that you put the right challenges in front of them for their growth, and you don't put them in over their head too early and just send them down a path that they just kind of can't recover from.
Right.
And there's a bunch of relevant examples that
Sure.
we can talk about. I mean, obviously the work you and I did prior to me leaving, making sure Luke got the right fights. That's the hard part. It's easy once, like you said, once they get to a contender status,
Right.
hey, everyone's fighting everybody.
Right.
There's no you kind of know
Whoever's
the deal.
available next is going to line up next.
Yeah, you kind of know the deal, right? This is the deep end.
Right.
And but early on, it's so important for a fighter's development. And the developmental program was just the hardest thing, the most rewarding thing, and the most fascinating thing to see a fighter grow and develop. I mean, obviously the poster child, you and I would talk about it. AJ.
Yeah.
Pro debut, world champ. What a night. I remember going in the back and talking to Tone about it. He's hoisting $1 million check, holding 2 belts, and it's like, man, this is like the pinnacle of the developmental program.
Anything after that is irrelevant. He literally did exactly what he and you and his father set out to do. We're going to debut with Bellator, or we're going to fight to the championship. And then he won the championship, right? It's a Cinderella story. Like, couldn't just fight there, get there, and then not win that one fight that was for the belt. He went all the way through and won the belt, and handily that night. And so, that's inspirational on our end, just because that's basically, I mean, when I reached out to you and we first started talking, I was like, I basically want to do what the same exact path that AJ took, you know? And I had spoken to Romy Aram, who I'd known Romy for years, and it was before me and you actually talked, or we had talked, but nothing, he hadn't fought yet. And I'd said, what's the layout there, whatever. And he said, man, he goes, to be honest, he goes, tell me you want to do exactly what AJ McKee did.
Yeah.
He goes, that's the path.
Yeah.
And so I kind of looked back at AJ's, all of his stuff, and I was like, oh, that is the path.
Yeah.
And that's, and look at him now, like the growth he had from fight 1 to now is like, could he have beat Pitbull then? No, but he built into the guy that could,
right?
And by fighting the way he did against the guys that he did, who improved as he improved, and it's just been that's something that is definitely pretty awesome. And for us, it was, like I said, when that happened, it was like, okay,
he set the standard, and.
There's a few other guys who have only fought in Bellator, right?
Yeah.
I've seen like Aaron Pico was
Pico,
one.
yeah, Pico's another guy that
Pitbull didn't have a lot of fights outside of Bellator before either, right? Just a couple.
Correct, yeah. But as far as pure homegrown, there are a couple guys. Pico's been doing his thing, and it goes back to kind of the tougher fights. Suffering setbacks early on. It could have gone like I've seen a lot of guys with amazing talent. As I'm sure you have as well, that just weren't able to put it together in time, or at the right moments, and you thought, man, I thought that was a sure thing. I thought this fighter was going to be a champ, and they fought a few times and it just didn't work out. Pico bounced back, made the adjustments he needed to make and got what he needed, and he's back on track. And
I'm a fan of his for that more than anything else.
Sure.
Because what a rough start with such a build-up. And then to go the way it did, and then he's right back and like reset.
Yeah.
He reset and is able to keep his head together and doing it now the way he's doing it. I was like, that was impressive. You gotta admire that for sure.
All that pressure.
Yeah.
I remember I knew him when he was I knew of him, I should say, when he was like in high school. You know, he was like the Kobe, LeBron,
Yeah.
you know, that phenom that was going to go,
I mean, he was placing at the Olympic trials
Yeah.
in wrestling when he was in high school.
yeah. I remember asking somebody like, oh, how do you do at States? They're like, oh, he doesn't wrestle States.
Yeah.
He's in Europe wrestling grown men in the world championships and whatnot. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, Aaron's a guy who started his career in Bellator, among several others. I mean, there's a few other guys in different weight classes that started in the developmental program, but that is the hardest thing to do because, okay, let's switch gears and say, all right, big name free agents that came in, and they're ready to go against anybody. Right. It's not like it's not that difficult.
Right.
You know, I don't think as a team we sat back and said like, you know, we were happy whenever the fight was exciting or, you know, something, you know, relevant happened that impacted the MMA world and the company in a good way. But, you know, so-and-so, you know, two high-level guys fight each other. It's not, you know, we said earlier, when you reach a certain, you know, a certain level and you become a contender, and now there's rankings in Bellator, you know, those things just kind of take care of themselves. The hardest part, the biggest challenge is making sure guys that have talent, that have ability, that can be stars, that they get there to that level, because they're kind of in your hands. And of course it has to be a mutual thing. That's where all this cooperation comes. That's where you develop these great relationships, like working very closely with you, like, hey, what do you think of you know, what's next? How's he doing? How's the hands coming along? Things like that. Same conversations we were having, you know, with all the other guys in this program, and making sure they achieve their potential.
Right.
You know, hey, sometimes it doesn't work out. Like I said, you know, we set the appropriate challenge up for them, and they didn't pass the test, and you know, that's just, you know, that's the sport. But the ones that do and continue to grow and get better, and then when they reach that AJ McKee level, and you know, I think Luke has that ability. I think Aaron has that ability. Ironically, they're on the same weight division. Yeah. But you know, Tyrell Fortune was another guy at heavyweight. Now that I'm starting to, you know, think of other names, and you know, and those, you know, several others. You know, it's a good program. It's something that we do that the other organizations don't really do, and I always took pride in that. I always, you know, embrace that. Like, you know, to go into the UFC, you have to be UFC ready. Right. And so you didn't do the developing. You know, we're doing the all of that. We're developing them and putting them through the program, and we're also, you know, so we were like regional show / big show, like, and that's where we would I would wear different hats, and the team, we would have to transition from like, what are the needs of this fight card? I know earlier you asked matchmaking, the process, your outlook. I think where we were different was, I mean, you know, it's no secret Bellator had consignment fights, right? With like the young local talent that would sell tickets in these markets, and it would give us a chance to look at them and evaluate the local guys, give them a shot, so to speak. So you're like matching at that level for those needs. You're matching a contender for, you know, you're matching someone on the developmental program to make sure they're developing. You're matching to develop the next contender, and then you've got like maybe a world title fight on top of that. So every fight, like, there's something that you want to see out of it. There's an outcome that's going to affect the roster and the company, and you're kind of it's not just randomly, let's just throw fights together. There's always a rhyme or reason. And I know there's times where fans would be like, why the hell did they make that fight? I'm like, can't tell you, but trust me, behind the scenes, it makes all the sense in the world, and it's something that was necessary.
Even Luke's first fight wasn't a contracted fight. You know, it was he's young, let's see him, you know, let's see him fight, and we didn't sign anything until after that fight.
I had to, like,
of course,
challenge you. Like, man, Chris has been bugging me. I go way back with Chris. I
like
Chris
so
a lot.
Stoked when
He's been bugging me for a while.
That was the matchmaker and everything there. I was like, man, this would be. I just wanted to line up for him correctly, and to be honest, we planned on having one more amateur fight, and he won his fight in Vegas at Tough Enough, and I talked to you, and he fought on the card 5 weeks later in Bellator here at the WinStar. And so it was like, oh, well, we're just going to skip that last amateur one and jump right in here. But, you know, there are a lot of guys. You were talking about there's other guys, Jalen Bates, You know, there's another small guy that I dig watching him fight. Jornel Lugo.
Yep.
Love watching that guy fight, and they're the weight class below, but I believe they started their fights in Bellator as well.
Yeah. Both homegrown guys.
Fun to watch, but yeah, that level, you watch them. Everyone improves quickly. You know, they improve quickly, and watching Lucas from his first fight to now it's pretty crazy. You know, and I was listening to Josh Thompson talk the other day, and he's talking about I want to see him strike more. I want to see this. I want to see this. And then his next podcast, he's talking to John, and he's saying, yeah, there's times where I don't remember what I'm talking about because of how many times I got punched in the head. So I'm like, and here you are telling me you want to see my kid strike more. It's like, I mean, you know, it's crazy because, of course, you want to see it, but at the same time, every fight that he's had that he's not had to use striking, he's gotten that much better by the next one. You know, so by the time it comes out there and he's ready to go, he's gonna be equal everywhere. You know, instead of catching up.
Right. Like this very conversation, we would be having this conversation, like the same conversation we're having. I basically could still be the matchmaker over there, and it's the same conversation. We're looking into his development of, hey, how are the hands coming along? We already know he's a very advanced grappler, but how are the hands coming along? Not that I want to see you knock somebody out in your next fight.
Right.
You don't have to prove that to us, but obviously you know that this is arguably the deepest division.
Oh yeah.
In not only in Bellator, but almost in all of MMA. Like one could say Volk is like the pound for pound #1 guy in the world, and
they're talking about it.
You know, I mean, I'd love to see him and Pitbull fight, right? But yeah, 45 in Bellator, where you're trying to climb the ladder. All these guys can do everything, so you can't be one dimensional.
Sure.
So yeah, we'd have the same conversation if it was back to that relationship.
And talking about like the guys at that level that you know what the next fight is, and you don't go. If you, let's say hypothetically, we get to number 432 and decide to move to 55, you don't go to number 10. You're one of the top guys, and you're going to stay one of the top guys. That, once you're there, you're there. And this, when Luke and I were talking about his next fight and the moving to better, Bryce Mitchell fought Edson Barboza, and he beat him. And I said, after you beat Edson Barboza, everybody after that is Edson Barboza. You don't get anybody. You don't go backwards again, right? So once you take that jump, you're in the deep end, and that's it.
You become a victim of your own success.
They pull the ladder away, and that's it. You're going. So it is important to have somebody, to not say yes, I'll fight Pat Miletich on my 4th fight. So to someone that'll guide you a little bit like that, and not only me that way, but you guys doing the same thing on your end. So it's been, like I said, phenomenal.
I would say the thing that you possess, and they're such unique situations, and it's coincidental that you and Antonio are both, they're your kids.
Right.
Again, like what I said earlier, they've grown up on the mats with you guys, and that's why they're so damn good, and it's amazing. But there's this level of patience that's there, that you guys have, that Antonio had with AJ, that you have with Luke, and there's a few other examples as well. But you guys are doing it the right way, and a lot of guys are not patient because they want to make the money, or they need to make the money. They're like, hey, I live in a really expensive city, and I got bills to pay, and I can't do it this slow developmental way. I need to fast track this thing for various reasons, and that's where things like, you got to be really damn good to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, otherwise they find out real quick why there is a developmental side to things.
Right, and like you said, it's very difficult to go back, right? So that's why we always caution people, like, the early days should be, the priority should just be staying busy and taking the right fights. And again, I get not everybody, if some guy starts off later but he's a top prospect and he's got a family already, I need to make the money now though, Rich. I can't just, I need to fast track this thing. And I'm like, man, I get it, but it's not going to be good for your growth and development. Like this is a very difficult, tricky game.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you need that experience.
If you want that money and you go for it right away and fail, you might get one more chance and fail again. Then you're not making that anymore.
And then you're on the outside looking in, wondering what the hell happened. It happened so quick. And I think the other thing that's really something to take note of is just, like when you're in that situation where these early fights, you have a ton of success, you're smoking guys, whether you're knocking them out quickly, you're tapping them quickly. And when you're first, and you never were tested, right? So let's say you get to 7 or 8-0 and you just crushed guys, first round finishes, right. Maybe a second round. And then you finally encounter that fighter that is there to win and isn't just rolling over.
Yep.
I've seen it so many times, right? You see them struggle that night, like, fuck, this guy's not going away.
Not going away.
And then you're in the third round and you've never been in the third round in your life, right? In your whole career.
Yeah.
And so you're tired, you're freaking out. Like it all starts falling apart. Yep. And it starts getting ugly and you see the desperation, you see the panic. And that's where I'm like, sometimes suffering those setbacks a little early on, getting tested a little early on, hey, I should have finished this guy sooner, but you went the distance. That's okay. I always tell the guys, that's fine. More time in there,
for sure,
the better, because I've seen it far too often. There's a guy, I think he has like 2 of the quickest knockouts in the history of the organization. He's not on the roster anymore.
Yeah.
Because not everybody walked right into that right hand.
Yep.
And when they didn't, and they knew they had more skills and had more fighting experience, and that you have to deal with all that. It's a different game. And so, you think that everyone's it's all going to be that easy. Like, you really got to be tested. You really got to get through those fights. You got to have those ugly nights. There'll be times, hey man, we weren't happy with that. I'm like, it's all good.
Yeah. You need it.
You got the rounds in. That's the most important thing, not the quick finish.
For sure. Even when he went the distance with Andrew Salas, even though he's on the dominant side of all 3 rounds, I was happy that it went the 3 rounds. He'd get that experience in. His first amateur fight, he finished the guy at the very end of the 3rd round, and got some time in. And even this last fight, when he choked the guy, I was like, all right, it's over. I was like, at the same time, I don't, Dad had a side. I want to see a little bit of adversity. I want to see him get through it. I want to see him, fight through something, because there is a gap of from now to those guys, those good guys. And I believe he has some of the skills that those guys have, and that's what's making these guys look bad. And so I want to find the in-between where there's a challenge, not just like he may punch me and knock me out, that challenge, but like there's going to be
get put in a bad spot.
There's going to be put on your back. There's going to be, they put your back to the
Maybe
fence.
you lose a round.
Yes.
Maybe it's 1-1 going into the 3rd, and you really got to go out and
and that was why I went. Like I said, we went up to Glory and trained, because I wanted him to lose a round and win the next round. Let me see you win a round after you lost one. And that's a big thing. That's important to be able to do. And so if it hasn't happened in the cage, it would need to at least be, making it happen in the gym, so that when it does happen, it's not shock.
Right.
Like, oh my God,
right.
And then just go that way.
Right. And that's the trickiest part, even for a coach, right? Is these early days. Like, you're vets, hey, let's just do what we do, right? Just another day at the office. But at this level, and going back to how this all started, that was the most challenging but also the most rewarding part, was matching these guys from day one, having a homegrown guy in the organization. I think that's what made Bellator unique. Still does to this day, because the program's still thriving. But I took more pride in that than I did big name guys, top contenders fighting each other, because those fights kind of came together on their own anyway.
Easier to put together. What do you think is the toughest thing to deal with, toughest part of matchmaking or dealing with fighters, managers, fighters?
All of the above.
Parents?
All of the above. Yeah, all those things I said earlier outside of the cage.
Yeah.
It's
putting it together is not quite the difficult part.
Putting it together in this day and age. And it's kind of all connecting, because we spoke about back in the day. Back in the day it was easy. Now it's there's all these different factors. Fighters have brands, and one guy doesn't want to fight another guy because of Instagram, or what I mean, just shit like that you hear that you're like, man, come a long way.
Yeah.
For good and for bad, but there's just different things, the politics of it, getting guys, just dealing with fighters still is the job. Managing the roster is the job. Putting the fights together,
Yeah.
that's the easy part. So, that's the challenge, managers, fighters. But look, again, it's a good thing. It's a good challenge because that's just a sign that the sport has grown. It's a real sport now with money, opportunity for all of us.
Right.
On the promotional side, on the fighter side. We're at a high level now, thankfully, and there's challenges to it, but it's a good thing. But
What do you think about sponsors, like what the UFC's done and what Bellator's still allowing to be done for each guy?
look, the UFC.
Like, for example, real quick, Luke, he's making much more now in his last few fights, but before that was still making good money. And then they would announce what Darren Till and Yoel Romero were making from Reebok, and Lucas was making the same as them on sponsorship wise.
Yeah.
So is it? I understand what they're trying to do, but how much money from the Reebok deal or the Venom deal is the UFC keeping and not giving to the fighters, and then allowing someone, the difference between Bellator allowing them to have their own sponsors and put money in the fighters' pockets?
Yeah, I don't know what the split looks like, but look, I will say the UFC is obviously very successful. I think they're having like their greatest year ever.
Yeah.
Despite the pandemic and all these other challenges. They run a very good business from the promotional side. Looking at how they operate, it's very impressive.
Right.
Like, I got nothing. They're kind of the standard, right?
But at the same time, like, if everyone in the UFC said, screw it, we're not coming back because of the sponsorship deal, they could fire everyone and have 600 guys on the roster tomorrow.
Yeah.
That just want to fight in the UFC.
Sure.
Right. So that's where the problem lies, because that's where, the majority of people are trying to get. So it doesn't matter what they do, people are going to keep fighting there, and that's it gets frustrating at a certain point. And where, I was glad that my Lucas and I were able to talk about it. I'm like, this is the route we want to go. I could have spoken to Mick and done a contender series deal, route and tried it that way. It would have sucked, whether we won or lost. It's just been, I feel like every time we fight and every time I hear something over there, I'm just reassured that we were stoked on the decision that we made to begin with. And so, I was just curious. I know obviously they're successful, but like, guys like Mighty Mouse, they ate it. He had a Xbox sponsor.
Yeah.
We're hooking him up one sponsor for the whole deal, and then he got dropped down to 40.
Yeah, that sucks. But it's their platform.
Yeah.
They worked hard. They put it all on the line to create it. Yet I can look at it from two different standpoints, and I'm obviously more of an advocate for fighters now, that I'm not working for a promotion. But on the promotional side, I get it too. I would look over and say, well, that will benefit us in some way, because we'll get some people that want to have free reign with all their sponsors. But I understand, they created a platform. I think those things were necessary to take the business to where they needed to take it.
Got it.
And so I can understand that. Now, that obviously doesn't satisfy a fighter who's losing money, but I just think, there are good managers out there, and they're just do your thing, control the controllables.
Right.
I'm a firm believer in that. With anything I do with my various projects, like especially over at Alta, like there's things you can't control. You just got to do the best you can. Let's keep winning. Let's keep dominating. Let's find the right deal. Let's find the right partnership where we can still grow with this brand outside of the cage. We can't wear it inside, but let's find ways and other things we can do. Just got to get creative. In addition to, expressing yourself, voicing your concerns and your opinion. I'm not saying just sit down and take it by any means.
Right.
Continue to fight for what you believe in, but while you're doing that, you can't just do that. You can't just complain. You have to find other ways to get creative and find a way to make up for it, or get creative and find different things you can do to kind of get what you need. And I know that sounds very cliche and whatnot, but you have no other choice.
Right.
Like there's guys that have been in the UFC forever, despite all these changes, and they've adapted and they found other ways to be successful.
Yeah.
So it's one thing, but that was very beneficial for Bellator, because some guys were making so much on sponsors.
Yeah, they came.
Yeah, it was almost like the fight money was the gravy, and the sponsorship was really where they were really making the real money, like annual deals, monthly deals. They were living off the sponsors, and it's funny, the fight purse was like just a bonus.
Yeah, Rory is an example. I know it was making a great amount of money on sponsorship and guys that came because of that reason alone. And that was one of the reasons, but it was one of the perks for sure about doing the stay or going with Bellator to begin with. And just because he was already, Lucas was doing well as an amateur with sponsors, and I was like, well, as a pro, it's got to be great, and so it's gotten better and better. So I love that route, and if it's hopefully it stays, but I don't know, who knows, everything changes, but hopefully it stays that way for at least for quite a while.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Alta.
Alta, yes. So I transitioned. I left Bellator about a year ago. It's funny, I just woke up one day, you will relate to this completely. I was at Mohegan and spent so much time there.
Oh yeah.
Lived there for several months, and look, grateful for the opportunity to get going again during the pandemic. But I just woke up one morning and I was like, man, I got 2 young kids at home, and I just thought, man, I think it's time for me to try something different. I think it's time for me to move on. When right?
Right.
I'm sure you've had moments in your life where you're like, yeah, this just feels like it's time to transition. Fortunately, I met a guy named Nick Langton, who's over in Australia, and John Kavanagh. They both approached me and heard that I was looking to transition, and asked if I would like to join their company, which at the time was called Wimp to Warrior.
Yep.
I'm like, man, what a goofy ass name. But I was starting to get to know Nick, and I had known John already. I really like and respect John. And I said, you know what? Tell me more, fellas, and give me some things to research and look at. And so they sent me a whole bunch of stuff. I spent several hours on Zoom with Nick over in Australia, and I really started to understand the business and what they do, and I fell in love with it. I got into the game and into the business as a fan first, and also as a practitioner first. I love training. I love martial arts. And you and I both sit here because that's what has guided our lives, right? It's changed our lives, given us everything, really. And I saw what this company does, and essentially what it, what the mission is, and the ambition is to take this thing that you and I love, that a lot of people love, that's helped us, and bring it to the masses to help them experience some of that magic. And it's not to be a pro fighter. I'm not a fighter.
Right.
I enjoy training like one, but I'm not a fighter. But it's done so much for me, and I feel like if other people in the world could experience that, the world might just be a better place. I know that sounds corny, but if more people had respect, discipline, and went through the grind, perhaps we wouldn't have all of this crazy shit happening, or maybe there'd be less of it. So the company's ambition is basically that, the big picture, to take MMA training, martial arts to the masses to help change people's lives. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. That's amazing.
Right.
And then you start getting into how you do that, and it's done through gyms and coaches all over the world. And you and I both know owning a gym is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a labor of love. You didn't open this place up thinking, I'm going to make millions of dollars and sit back and watch the money come in. You opened this amazing facility up because you love to teach, you love martial arts. Yeah. And so when I saw that the way that we take the sport to the masses is through gym owners and helping gyms and coaches and helping that whole industry, elevating it, because fighters are making more money now than they ever have, right?
Yep.
And I know there's a lot there's a lot to be said about it not being enough, but it's the most that there's ever been.
Right.
Fight promotions are doing well. They're growing. They've got a lot of money to pay out these days more than ever. So those two industries are doing great, right? Or those two categories in our industry are doing well. On the gym side, gyms are still struggling. Coaches are still broke, no matter who you coach.
Right.
You can have the best guy in the world. Those guys aren't necessarily completely benefiting financially from it, right? So I saw this as a way to go in and help that sector, to help elevate, give gyms extra revenue opportunities, give them more visibility, give them more marketing. This company, what it essentially does is puts the spotlight on gyms like yours, while focusing on people that never thought about training, that drive by here every day, but for one reason or another never pulled up and walked in and talked to you.
Right.
So that's how we get those people in to train and change their lives. So I thought, okay, big picture, changing the world, changing lives through MMA, helping gyms and gym owners. Man, this is really cool.
Right.
This is really cool. I get to work with my friends like yourself all over the world and help their businesses grow while bringing them new people, to learn and discover MMA. And so it's very fulfilling on those two levels, helping average everyday people, helping gym owners. And so I'm seeing this whole dynamic and I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
But the name, guys, like Wimp to Warrior, I get it.
The concept makes sense.
It's a great way to identify and signal the transformation. You're going from a wimp to a warrior. I get it. But is there a different way to do that? Nobody wants to be called a wimp. And you're not a wimp when you show up. The hardest part is showing up,
Sure.
right? You respect everyone that just shows up to train. They might not be getting as good as some of the other guys, but your respect for them is there. And so if you show up and train, you are not a wimp. So we just wanted to create a brand that was more inclusive. And we worked with a really great company out in New Zealand. They did the Uber Eats campaign, a really amazing creative agency, and they presented us with the Alta brand, and we really spent a lot of time talking about it, dissecting it, going through the ins and outs, and we felt like it was the right fit, it was the right brand. So we went from Wimp to Warrior to Alta, and things are going great. I'm responsible for the growth of the brand in North America. We've launched at several really amazing gyms. I'm proud to call these guys partners over at, Daniel Cormier Wrestling Academy, El Nino with Gilbert Melendez, Extreme Couture, Combat Sports Academy, Systems Training in Hawthorne, so on and so forth. And where I'm getting ready to launch more programs next week, with Alberto Crane, Rafael Cordero, the guys Kings
nice.
Is on board. The guys at Black Sheep and over in Austin, they run an amazing program. And so having the opportunity, Fight Ready over in Scottsdale launches next Monday as well. So, we have this amazing opportunity to work with a lot of my old pals.
Sure.
That are really doing amazing things at their gyms, helping them grow, helping them make some more money, and bringing new people in. So to help grow the sport in that way, to me, was just this amazing challenge, and I felt like it was the right time for me to do it. So a little over a year in, things are going well, and eventually, we're going to bring it over here to next generation and get people in Frisco doing things that they didn't think they could do, doing things that they didn't think were impossible.
That's always the exciting part, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I heard you were leaving, I started to panic. And I was like, wait, what? And I messaged you and found out you were leaving. And then here we are now. You had left Bellator, started doing this, and here I am now, going to transition into, at one point doing the Alta here at my gym and staying connected with you. And it's been awesome. And now you're living in Texas, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how this whole thing, it's crazy. I said earlier, I've been extremely nostalgic. I'll be 43 this year, and I know that's not old, but as I get older, I appreciate moments like this, relationships like this. I met you 20 years ago on a tiny little island in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Never at one point did I ever think that we'd be friends for this long and stay connected, much less think that I'd sign your son to a fight organization I was working at, much less think that he'd be coaching my son downstairs wrestling, and that we'd be living in Texas together. Because you weren't even in Texas at the time, right?
No, I've been here for 16 years, and it was before I moved here in 2006. So yeah, I was still living in California.
Yeah,
and
life.
Here we end up in the same state doing a podcast.
Yeah, life's a trip. And again, what was the connector, the glue? Martial arts.
Yep.
Our passion for this amazing sport, and I'm grateful for it. Thanks for welcoming me not only to the show but to Frisco, and I'm excited for the future, man. The future's bright for you and Luke.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like we're doing the right thing. I feel like we're doing it right. That's most important, I think, is being able to do it right. And I've guided him, you've guided me, and it's just kind of gone the right direction. And yeah, again, martial arts, something I didn't even think my kids would be into. Now they're, one's wrestling D1, the other one's fighting, and now the one that's wrestling wants to fight when he's done. And
it's a family biz, man.
Yeah,
it is. That's
and again, so crazy. Your son now is wrestling. Lucas is coaching him, and it's just the way the world turns, I guess.
Yeah, very awesome. Feel good, and to me, that's all I want these days. Those are the moments that I'm going after. It's not necessarily sign the next big thing. Next big fighter, put on mega events. It's really moments like that. It's helping people. It's reconnecting with people on a different level. And I know it might sound corny, cheesy, and this guy's getting old and soft. Maybe, but it's all right. That's where I'm at
important.
In life, and that's what makes me feel good. So
awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, man. Appreciate it so
Thanks,
much.
Man.
Thank you.
Hey, we were talking about that.
That was my Scott Coker. Real quick before we go. Finally got to meet Scott Coker. Lucas is on the fight card. We're walking over to check the check scale, and for whatever reason, Scott's sitting in the red corner's locker room on the phone, right next to, literally the scale is here, and his chair is next to it, and he's on the phone. I'm walking up to the scale, and he sticks his hand out while he's on the phone. And I was like, oh, cool, he wants to shake my hand. So I go to shake my hand, and he's fist bumping. So then I go to fist bump, and he puts his hand out to shake, and I was like, and I just shook his wrist basically, and I apologized. I was like, I'm sorry. I just walked away. I walked back to the locker room. And I was like, hey, Luke, I think I just got you fired. He's like, great.
Yeah, rough first impression, but I think you guys are going to be all right over there.
Awesome. I thank you for setting it up. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is all over, just like that.